Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Penny Pincher Firearms. I'm just doing a video that I want to try and do a few of these, and I'm inviting my viewers, though few they are, to kind of join in on this. And I always welcome questions. That's one of the reasons I've gotten into being more of an educator for firearms than just showing off guns and stuff. It's important for people to understand guns and understand the person behind the gun as much as it is to understand the gun. So I asked my friends and family on Facebook. I'm not going to use anybody's last name, so people don't worry about anybody stalking you, not like they would. But I asked them, the basic question was, if you could ask me one thing about guns or my life with guns, what would it be? So I've got a handful of questions, not too many of them. Just to make a short video, I kind of wanted to make a talking head since I haven't done that in a while. So let's get started with the first question I got from my friend who I worked with up in Oregon, Brian. So he asks, and this question comes up a bit more in the future, so if I don't mention you, I'm sorry. It's just Brian got the question first. That's how we're going to have to go with it. So he goes, what was it exactly that made you the gun lover that you are? Like I said, this is kind of differently worded by some other people, but in general, I'm trying to answer all of those people who asked that same question. Some people asked me in message, by the way, so if you didn't see it on the comment list, that's why. I did it through message. So the reason I became the gun lover that I am is, I hate to say it, I don't like my father, but it was my father. He was really into guns. His interest in guns was, if I remember properly, his was mostly like World War II and cowboy action stuff. Kind of what I fall into, sort of, as well. But my interest is more kind of weird guns. If you ever watch ForgottenWeapons.com, that's kind of my thing, is the guns that people don't really remember, or guns that are cheap and kind of look at and go, oh my god, you paid how much for that gun? It's going to fall apart on you. I like those things because then I can go back and shoot it with somebody and in a lot of cases surprise them. These guns are actually pretty well made in a lot of cases. But another reason I became the gun lover that I am is I like the engineering. Personally, I'm not an engineer. I'm a geographer. I work with ArcGIS, that sort of thing. But I really enjoy kind of the weird engineering that went into guns, especially during the turn of the century, like late 1800s, early 1900s, when things were starting to change, when bolt guns were becoming more popular. All the different things that people were trying out at that time period really just fascinates me. That's really why I like the Krag so much, is the Krag design is just so off the wall. Like, I don't understand how somebody would just have that idea come into their head. Kind of the same thing with the Luger. I always thought, yeah, it's kind of obvious, like the toggle link design, but to me, Browning's, telescoping bolt is way more obvious than that. Like, it makes more sense to add weight, but whatever. So it's all these different things. The history too. Some guns just have a really fascinating history behind them. Mauser guns, I always thought, had a really interesting history. They're really easy to collect. I personally don't collect them, but if I wanted to, it wouldn't be that hard to get some really interesting variants, because everybody and their mother bought Mausers from, like, I would say 1889 all the way until the 1950s. People were buying Mausers from designs from FN, or even just having them manufactured by FN. So everybody had one. It wasn't that odd, but there's so many different variants. So I would find that interesting. Maybe I'll collect them someday, but they're really not like my dream to collect. So yeah, Brian, that's why I became the gun guy, the gun lover that I am today. Next question is from my friend Melody. She asks, how often do you draw blood, little nicks and stuff, when cleaning your guns? Never. I don't think I've ever had that happen. I mean, I guess I pinched myself on bolts before when I had my VZ58. I pinched myself on that maybe a few times, but even then, like, it's so rare. Like, I don't remember when it happened. Mostly because most guns have a lot of like rounded edges. They're not very sharp. And then cleaning tools that you use, they have handles and stuff, so they're not really gonna cut you up. I guess if I was using like my Mosin Nagant's cleaning kit, which I have, I potentially could scratch myself, but even then, like, the thing is pretty decently designed. So yeah, it's pretty. It's rare enough that I can't remember an exact moment where I've cut myself. Now, I've had, while using a gun, like going to the range and stuff, I've had things like pinching before, where the slide would bite me. I get slide bite, I'd get hammer bite, that sort of thing. But I've never really had anything like that happen while cleaning, or maybe I've gotten it happen when I've disassembled, but even then, it's so rare. I know my guns pretty well, and I know how to assemble them to the point where it's just second nature. So I do know my first experience with guns, Melody, was with a .22 revolver, and I was very young. I think I was 3, and we went shooting in Louisiana out in the woods, and I dropped the hammer on my thumb, which made my thumb bleed. So that's one moment that I genuinely do remember, because that was my first experience with guns, and I'm so thankful it did not turn me off to them. I thought guns were really interesting. So next is I think she's my cousin, Elizabeth. Not my mom. My mom didn't ask me a question. Come on, Mom. What's going on here? So where is your favorite location to go shooting, and why? I don't know. It's a really hard one. I even commented to her, like, it's a really hard one. I think if I'm wanting a controlled situation, I like going to the range. If I could, especially for shooting rifles, if they could make a very long range indoor range, and they do make them, but if they had one here in San Antonio, where I am right now, I'd be in love, because I really want controlled environments. So I'm really going down to me and the rifle to understand the accuracy that I'm achieving is not related to outside conditions. I have like this stable environment that I can worry about. Failing that, since we don't have one here, my favorite range in town is the Bullet Hole. I've been going there for I'd say 5 years now, and it's easily my favorite range so far that I've ever been to. I've been to many different ranges in my lifetime, and it's so far been my favorite. Everybody there's really friendly. Everybody loves to share stories, but you don't have like the because I've been to some ranges where all the people are like tactical dudes that just jive on you about all kinds of stupid things about your gun not having this or that, or you should get an AR when I had my VZ58, and just shut up, guys. Bullet Hole, I've only had that happen once, and I haven't seen that guy since. He wasn't working there. He was just some dude who was shooting there with his AR, which was all tacked out, and I thought that was so stupid, but whatever. So yeah, Bullet Hole, San Antonio. If you live in San Antonio, guys, go to Bullet Hole. Great range. Initial pay is not bad. You have to buy a card for a membership, but otherwise, after that, range fees are really good. And if you need to buy a replacement target and move to a different part of the range, it's $1. So the prices do go up with time, because I've actually talked with the woman there. I know most of the people there. She said that her property tax went up, so she increases prices accordingly every year. Just most of the money she gets through that, she says she just puts into property tax. She doesn't make a whole lot of money off of the range. She just lives there, and it works out well for her. I think it's pretty cool. It's a nice range. It really is. It has private bays, all that stuff. Now, when I'm just out just shooting for fun, which here in San Antonio means going to the Bullet Hole, but when I'm out in the backcountry working out in the woods, I've really only shot in a few places. I've shot in Arizona, I've shot in Utah, New Mexico, and Oregon, and Northern California. So far, my favorite place to have shot is the Lincoln National Forest Sacramento Ranger District, because up in those mountains, there's these really good sheltered areas that you can shoot in, and you don't have to worry about you sending rounds in the wrong direction. And it's not particularly rocky up there. I mean, there are rocks and everything, but ricochets are not really a big deal. Just to say, like, the worst place was Modoc National Forest, which is where I was shooting most of my previous videos, because most of the rocks there were mafic rocks, like basalts. So they're higher in iron, very dense. And seriously, in some of my videos, you can hear bullets whizzing off in the background, and that always freaked me out. I knew they probably would not be coming my direction, but who knows where they were going to land, and it always worried me, because nearby was like Tule Lake. I mean, it was miles and miles down the road, but still, you know, you get that cringe feeling. You know, something could happen. So it always kind of bugged me. But usually up in Cloudcroft, you never really ran into that. It was usually pretty dusty, sandy soils with some rocks mixed in out there. So, you know, that would be my favorite backcountry place. Okay, now on to the questions I got through messages. So let's go over there. And I'm kind of doing this in reverse order just because it's how everything came through. One from my friend Elise. At first she said, "I don't know." And then she followed up with, "Why guns? How old were you when you first shot one, first owned one, and my favorite one by far?" I got a cat bothering me behind me. I think he hears me talking, so he wants to hang out with me, but I'm going to keep him out of the way. So, why guns? That's the same kind of question that Brian asked before, but not really. Particularly, why guns? Why I didn't get into, say, like train sets, or actually for a while I was into building computers, but why I'm not still in that is the portability of the hobby. Yes, you can transport computers. Yes, you can transport your train sets and everything, but shooting is a hobby that you can really take with you a lot of places. You know, you can actually spend a weekend in the woods with a handful of targets and a rifle and a tent, and you're good to go. You can enjoy your hobby out in the woods. And I am an outdoorsman, as most people know. I like to be outside, and you know, it's the perfect thing. It mixes in quite well, and if, you know, there's an emergency, I could probably feed myself, even though I've admitted previously I am a terrible hunter. I'm not great at all. But, you know, I'm sure I could learn if I'm starving enough. So that's why guns, I would say. Also, my previous interests that I highlighted on Brian's question. How old were you when you first shot one? I think I was 2. I'm not entirely sure. We were in Louisiana, and I was shooting that 22 that I mentioned before for Melody's question. But I'm not entirely sure. I was fairly young. I think after that, though, it was a while before I shot again. I think it was maybe like 5 or 6. I started getting more interested in guns at that point. I think we were in Texas. So that was my formative experience for shooting. Smashing a hammer on my thumb on a rimfire revolver. Which, as I know, last my dad had one, or had the one that did that to me. I'll never forgive it. When I first owned a gun, the first gun I bought myself, I should say. I'm not going to count the previous 2. I had a 30-30 Marlin that I wasn't really interested in. My dad bought it for me because that was the rifle he wanted. It wasn't what I wanted. I traded it for a 303 British, which I had for a while. Never really shot that much. I was never really that into that rifle either, but I wanted a military rifle. I was always interested in military rifles. So I guess that was the first one I bartered for. I traded my godfather, Rudy, for it. But the first gun I actually bought, I put my own money into, was a 22. In fact, I still have it, so just hold on a second. Alright, so this was the first gun I actually put money in for. So it's a Mossberg 702 Plinkster. My mom helped me get it when I was, I think, like 13. I had a bunch of Christmas money, and I was like, you know, I want a 22 rifle. I wanted something I could plink with. So she helped me out and got it. It's now officially in my name. I've been able to since basically state that I am the owner of this. I have a Curio and Relic license, and I decided, you know, it's not really part of my collection, but I wanted to take my name or my mom's name off of it. So it's officially mine. This thing has been used and abused for years. I finally started to pamper it because it's, you know, a big part of my shooting history. But yeah, this was the first gun I can say that, you know, I invested my money into. If you consider Christmas money my money, I didn't really earn it other than, you know, for being alive. But, you know, it was $87. I even remember how much I paid for it. It was $87 at Walmart. It's 22, 10-round magazine. You can see how worn that is already over the years. I left it at my dad's for the longest time, and they just beat the crap out of it, which is cool. I mean, it's a little 22 plinker gun, and it'll be my son's in the future if I can convince his mom to let him shoot. But yeah, that was my first gun. The first gun I bought myself, did my background check and everything all by myself. I did that over at the Cabela's over in Buda. I don't have the gun anymore. It was stolen, literally, out of my apartment a couple of years ago. SAPD, by the way, San Antonio Police Department, still has not given it back to me. Even though the case has been closed on it, they refuse to give it back to me. So, BS, guys, give me my gun back. But it was a Bursa Thunder 380. Pretty nice pistol. You know, I bought it mostly for my son's mom. She decided she wasn't so interested in shooting anymore, and it fell by the wayside. So it's not a huge loss, but still, SAPD, give me my freaking gun back. My favorite gun by far. I got it behind me. So my favorite gun is in this case. Now that's not that hard of a question. I told her it was a hard one, but I thought about it more and more. That's why it took me a while to do this. But my Luger. Magazine's empty. Chamber's empty. The Luger is my favorite. It's the gun next to the Krag that I always wanted. This was the pistol I always wanted. And I have it, and it makes me happy. It's just such a nice handgun. It's so comfortable. It shoots so well. I mean, it's over 100 years old. It's 106 years old. And it's still spot on accurate. It's amazing. So, you know, it's close to my heart, just like my Krags are. And it's just, you know, it shoots a readily available round. So, it's my favorite. Second in line would probably be my Norwegian Krag, mostly for the history rather than for any other reason. It just has a really fascinating history. So yeah, my Luger is definitely my favorite gun though. So next would be my buddy Nate. So he asks, pros and cons, revolver versus handgun with clip. Now, Nate, come on. So this, Nate, is not a clip. It's a magazine. Same goes for, in this case, this is a magazine. A clip holds the rounds. I don't have one readily available. I think I have one over in a box over there. Don't feel like digging it out because I know it's buried. But to explain that briefly, magazine holds all of the rounds ready for loading like this. It usually encases it, has the spring and everything. It's a contained unit to feed the gun. A clip just holds bullets for one of two reasons. One, to be stripped off into the magazine of the firearm, or the entire clip, an end block clip, is dropped completely in there, which is the case with Malichers, Carcanos, and M1 Grands, Pedersens, that kind of thing. Those have clips. This is a magazine. This is a magazine. This is a magazine. So, you know, that's so you know. The Krag, the little lever on the side, That's a magazine. So that's out of the way. Pros and cons. I'm going to make this quick. So can make a brief cut and I'll get right back to you. Okay, so I've got a revolver here. It's my my 1895 Nagant revolver. It's 7.62 by 2.5 or 3.8. Sorry, 7.62 by 2.5 is this one. 7.62 by 3.8 revolver. And one of the first things I want to point out with a revolver is this thing. This is the cylinder. Now, a cylinder, as you can see, has all these chambers inside where the ammunition goes into. This is obviously a more modern gun than my black powder ones. That's a story for a different day. But the main thing that makes the revolver work is this cylinder revolving. The way it revolves is there's teeth back here, and hopefully I can get it to focus. If not, there's not much I can do about it. I can't see my screen. So there's these basically teeth on the back, and then there's a lever called the hand. You can probably just barely see it. It's that pointed piece of metal, and what it does is it rotates the cylinder. Now, that's the only thing really moving this. That's really the only thing that can fail this, and that's really the only thing that can jam. So, it makes revolvers extremely reliable, and they are. They've always been fairly reliable guns. Really the only thing with like the old Colts that could stop a cylinder was your caps. They would fall in and block things up, but that was really it. Otherwise, there was not much that would really get in the way of these, other than fouling. And that would just gum things up, slow things down, make it harder to cock. But otherwise, your gun would still work. So there's no way you can jam rounds or anything. This one has, in a sense, jammed rounds, but that's mostly because Nagant revolvers are weird. So don't worry about that. So really, I think the biggest pro to a revolver is the fact that it's nearly impossible to jam. Another pro is you can shoot these in most cases nowadays, especially. You can shoot them in two different ways. There's single action where you pull back the hammer and then you pull the trigger. And then there's double action, which, if you know Nagant revolvers, is a lot heavier. This one I've accurized and customized quite a bit to relieve some of that tension on the spring, but it's still pretty stiff. But that's one advantage I also think that you have with a revolver is you can do double single. And as long as all chambers are loaded, you're good to go. You don't have to worry about racking a slide or anything. So the reason I brought out the Tokarev was the Tokarev is, and this is for people on the channel, the first time you've seen the Tokarev. The Tokarev is a standard slide operated handgun. So it's basically a Colt, or a Browning 1903, sorry, and it's slide operated, pretty much like every handgun that you run into these days. So this is your typical handgun, the Tokarev. The Tokarev is 7.62 by 2.5. It's another Soviet gun, just like the Nagant revolver. This was actually designed by a Belgian, and the design was bought by Imperial Russia. Later on, this one has the Tula arsenal. So this one was made in the Soviet Union. This was made in Romania as part of the Soviet Union. So another Soviet gun. It was designed by the Soviet Union. Blah 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 blah. But one of the pros I would say of this gun is that it shoots much faster. The trigger is also much lighter. It's actually the recoil in most handguns like this is lighter than a revolver because you have some of the action of recoil is being thrown into the slide. So it's actually being used to create work, whereas with the revolver, it's not being used to create work. It's all just pushing right back on you. That would be one of the disadvantages, is recoil tends to be higher in revolvers. And one pro that I didn't go over was the fact that you can put larger bullets, larger rounds into revolvers because they're a sturdier design. You can see that frame is metal. I mean, the Nagant revolver is not really that sturdy of a design, but you know, it's the basic revolver. This is the basic revolver, other than the weird moving forward cylinder thing. But this is essentially what most revolvers are designed like. But you can put more powerful ammunition into a revolver. You can't really put super powerful ammunition in handguns unless you have like all kinds of interesting lock work going on. Desert Eagles have like rotating bolt heads. This one in particular just has a falling barrel. It's basically just like delayed blowback sort of situation. The barrel pulls down off some locking lugs during recoil after it moves back a few millimeters and drops the barrel out of the way, lets the slide continue back through inertia, and then reload. One disadvantage that you have with a revolver, with a pistol like this, a slide operated handgun, is you can have jams in the chamber here called stovepipes. So basically you either have it after ejection or before loading. Your bullet is coming off of the magazine up the loading gate, and it ends up getting caught in the chamber, or between the chamber and the ejection port on here, and gets stuck and stovepipes. It's like a stovepipe coming out. Same thing can happen during ejection. It's extracting the round, but it isn't actually fully ejecting. Slide goes forward, it loads the next round, but at the same time it catches that piece of brass in place. So I think personally handguns like this are better, especially in modern times. Of course, you know, history has shown that revolvers are more reliable, but as far as handguns go, semi-automatic handguns especially are probably the way to go for military purposes because they're fast shooting. They tend to, you know, contain most of their combustion in the barrel or force it away. Whereas unless you're shooting a Nagant revolver, which is probably a bad example to bring up for this case, but you have a cylinder gap that you lose some gases, the tiny bit of power behind the bullet, but those gases can hurt the person who is shooting the firearm. Another thing is you have all these self-contained magazines that you can load later. You can have a whole bunch of these and it's simple to reload. Whereas with a revolver, usually there's a loading gate and you have to extract all the rounds from your cylinder and then replace your rounds in the cylinder, close the loading gate, so on and so forth, and then shoot. So it takes a bit more time to unload one of these. You have cases like Smith & Wessons, of course, and the newer guns where they have the folding out cylinders and everything just kind of pops out, which, you know, is really cool. And it's a faster way of unloading. They also have moon clips and all that stuff. You know, that stuff's great, but still in the end, this is faster. Dropping the magazine and then grabbing another one, putting it in. So much faster. So that's one of the pros. One of the cons also with these is with smaller rounds, less powerful rounds, they're heavier than a revolver. Mostly because they're using recoil. This is a telescoping bolt. That's what a slide is a telescoping bolt. It's using some of the weight to buffer some of the recoil, also to control the speed of reloading and all that. So they tend to have to be heavier even for smaller rounds. So it's one disadvantage, but really not a huge disadvantage. So there you go. There you go, Nate. There's your pros and cons. See, my buddy Jay, this will be the last question. Where and when did your passion for guns begin? Now, I also consider this different from the other people who asked me, like, you know, what made me this way. I think my passion, my genuine, like, desire for collection was probably from when I first bought my Krag, and I realized how inexpensive, if you really know where to look and work at it, a shooting hobby can be. even with these obscure guns. I got that Krag for $500. I bought it from Cabela's, and most Krags I've seen are usually in the range of $1,000 to $1,500 in original form. I'm aware Cabela's had no idea what they had. I didn't even know what they had. I was just like, ooh, Norwegian Krag, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go buy it. So I drove all the way up to Buda and picked it up. And realizing how inexpensive the hobby could be is where the passion came in. And I think about a year later is when I bought my CNR license, which isn't a very expensive thing. It's $30. But that's where it started. Since then, I think it's expanded when I was finally able to get my Luger. This is probably going to be the most expensive gun I ever buy because it's a Luger. They demand a high price. I paid $1,250 for it, $1,250, way back in 2013. So it was a while ago. I know it's worth more. I even discussed it with the guy when I was buying it, and the guy essentially said like they had it for the longest time, and just couldn't sell it because nobody wanted a Luger. So I just lucked out. And that's really what a lot of it is too, is me getting lucky and finding these guns. But the passion started with the Norwegian Krag and actually finding one for a decent price, and finding out that if I know where to look, know who to talk to, I can save a lot of money on these really cool guns just by, using my head, It didn't look as intimidating as before. And most of my guns actually don't cost even nearly as much as I paid for that Luger. I think my next most expensive gun is my Sharps. And that felt like I was spending too much money. So, by the way, I plan on keeping the Sharps now. I've actually been able to figure out a decent load for it. So, I'm pleased. So yeah, that's the questions I got from everybody. Thanks for asking, by the way. I actually did not expect this much. I did message some people my question. I didn't actually expect them to answer. So I actually really appreciate, you guys humoring me. And I want to invite my watchers, my viewers, to ask me some questions too. Ask me about different guns that I own right now that maybe you're curious about. Maybe one that I haven't talked about in a while. I can do a short video on. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to do any shooting videos for a while, probably another month. So, it's not an easy time when I'm stuck here in San Antonio. Private bays over the shooting range are kind of expensive. But if you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask. Comments below. Just let me know. I love answering questions. I really do. I really like hearing from viewers. It just makes me happy to know that there are people interested in the same thing I'm interested in. So just remember, everybody, a good gun doesn't have to cost a pretty penny.